At 6:47 a.m., on a morning that should have been quiet, I stood in my backyard wearing an Old Navy bathrobe, coffee steaming in my hand, watching my sprinklers throw soft arcs over the flowers I'd planted 3 weeks earlier, when 3 patrol cars screamed into Maple Ridge Reserve like they were responding to a hostage crisis instead of a garden. The air smelled like wet soil and engine exhaust. Neighbors pressed their faces to windows, blinds twitching like nervous eyelids. And at the center of it all stood Felicia Carrington, HOA president, pastel blazer crisp, lips curved into a smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Officers, he's trespassing during restricted irrigation hours," she declared as though announcing a guilty verdict, pointing at me with a manicured finger that had ruined more lives than a bad mortgage rate. One of the officers, young, stiff, clearly uncomfortable, looked at me, then at the sprinklers that had already shut off, then back at her clipboard. "Sir, we're placing you under arrest for criminal trespass. For watering flowers. In my own yard." 2 minutes past a deadline she invented. The cold snap of handcuffs around my wrists pulled me straight back to 100 courtrooms, except this time I was on the wrong side of them. And the ridiculousness of it all almost made me laugh. Almost. Because humiliation has a weight, and it sits differently when the entire neighborhood is watching. But Felicia Carrington, blonde hair lacquered into gravity-defying perfection, perfume thick enough to stun cattle, didn't know who she was dealing with. She didn't know I was Graham Ellison, retired judge of the Superior Court, a man who'd spent 30 years dismantling bullies with badges and clipboards alike. She didn't know that while she basked in the spotlight she thought she'd created, a camera inside my tool shed was already recording everything with timestamp accuracy. But to explain how we got here, me in cuffs, her drunk on power, we need to rewind 6 months. Laura, my wife, and I bought our forever home in Maple Ridge Reserve after I retired from the bench. Retirement, for me, meant one thing: peace. Peace from endless motions, peace from crowded courtrooms, peace from the weight of deciding other people's futures. I wanted tomatoes, hummingbirds, and mornings where I didn't have to put on a tie unless I felt like it. The first week was perfect. Neighbors waved. Kids rode bikes. The air smelled like fresh mulch and possibility. Then, on day 3, came the heels. Click, click, click. Sharp, deliberate, authoritative. Heels belonging not to a friendly neighbor, but to someone who believed the world bent around her. I opened the door to find Felicia Carrington standing on my porch, clipboard thick as a law textbook, smile stretched too wide to be sincere. "Welcome to Maple Ridge Reserve," she chirped, handing me a stack of courtesy notices. "Just a few small items we need you to address." The items included tomato plants visible from a walking path, a bird feeder, unapproved garden layout. Apparently, food you grow yourself is offensive to property values. I scanned the so-called rules, recognizing twisted, selectively interpreted language designed to keep people compliant. When I pointed out Section 4.2, which explicitly allowed backyard gardening, her tone shifted. "We interpret the rules consistently here," she said, pronouncing interpret like it was divine authority. "And I've been president for 8 years. Red flag, bright as a stoplight. But I wanted peace. So I removed the tomatoes, replanted bland shrubs, and promised myself I'd ignore the warning bells. That lasted about a week, until the neighbors started confessing their own battles. Mrs. Rosa Delgado, widow, fined $500 because her Christmas lights were hung early. Ethan and Kelsey Parker, parents of 2 little boys, fined for toys visible through their garage window. Leonard Russo, retired mailman, fined because his newspaper landed outside the designated delivery zone. And the pattern was unmistakable. Immigrants, young families, people who wouldn't fight back. I'd seen this too many times, small-time dictators hiding behind bylaws, wielding authority like a weapon. Still, I stayed quiet. Until the morning she slapped a $200 criminal water theft fine on my door because she claimed my sprinklers ran until 6:47, even though I'd set them, precisely, to shut off at 6:45. And suddenly, peace didn't feel worth the price anymore. That irrigation fine was the moment something old and sharp inside me reawakened. The part of me that had listened to liars on the stand for 30 years. The part that could smell manipulation like smoke. The part tired of bullies hiding behind rules no one agreed to. Because every morning, at exactly 6:43 a.m., I heard those heels. Click, 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 like a timer counting down to insanity. Felicia power walked past my yard with military precision, clipboard clutched like a sheriff's badge, stopwatch in hand, eyes locked on my sprinklers as if I were running some criminal irrigation cartel. So I installed a timestamp camera, professional grade, synced to the second, pointed directly at my sprinkler panel. For 2 weeks, it captured the same thing every morning. 6 hours and 45 minutes, sprinklers off. Not 6 hours, 45 minutes, and 1 second. Not 6:46. Exactly 6:45. But you know whose sprinklers ran until 6:52? Whose husband pressure washed the driveway during restricted hours? Whose pool guys cranked up loud equipment at 7:30 a.m. on Sundays? Felicia Carrington herself. Textbook selective enforcement. A classic pattern-eyed scene in discrimination cases. Rules as weapons, not standards. So I invited her over. Coffee, kitchen table, neutral ground. She walked in with that same chemical cloud of floral perfume that felt like it could knock out a buffalo, sat down like she owned the house, and folded her hands as if preparing to discipline a schoolchild. I slid the timestamp photos across the table, my sprinklers stopping perfectly, hers blasting like geysers long past the limit. The transformation on her face was almost cinematic. Confusion, recognition, panic, rage, flickering like someone flipping channels. These images are harassment, she spat. You're spying on my property. Taken from public view, I replied smoothly, documenting the same behavior you've monitored from the sidewalk every morning. She could have apologized. She could have de-escalated. But bullies rarely choose the off-ramp. Instead, she dialed 911 right there in my kitchen, voice raised to an operatic pitch. He's harassing a community official. He's violating irrigation law. I stared at her, mid-sip of coffee, thinking, you really don't know who you're dealing with. When Officer Daniel Ruiz arrived, a man I'd sworn in as a detective 2 years earlier, his expression said it all. He listened to her rant, watched the timestamp video, and I could physically see the moment he realized the HOA president had been using the police like her personal servants. But that was just Felicia warming up. The next week, my daughter Hannah came home with her boyfriend Mark, parking in the clearly labeled guest space. Saturday morning, another bright red violation. Guest parking limit exceeded, 25 hours. Fine, $150. Accept the HOA's real covenant, Section 7.3c. Set the limit at 48 hours. Not 24. Not Felicia's imaginary math. That was the moment the judge and me woke up completely. I went to the county recorder's office, pulled the original HOA documents, and realized something that made the hairs on my arms stand up. The Maple Ridge Reserve Homeowners Association had been legally dissolved 2 years ago. Failure to file reports. Automatic state dissolution. No board. No authority. No legal existence whatsoever. Felicia had been running a ghost corporation, collecting dues, issuing fines, threatening families, filing liens, all under the name of an organization that was, in the eyes of the law, as real as a unicorn. I remember sitting in my car with the printed dissolution document in my hands, breathing hard, thinking, this woman built an empire on paper dust. And while I was connecting dots, Felicia was detonating landmines. She threatened Ethan and Kelsey Parker with CPS involvement. She sicked 2 fake immigration officers on Mrs. Rosa Delgado, elderly, naturalized, whose granddaughter sold lemonade for quarters. She vandalized my security cameras, spray paint, cut wires, then fined me for malfunctioning equipment. She sent a forged restraining order signed by a judge who'd been dead for 3 years. She even hired 2 men in cheap suits to sit in an SUV outside my home like they were starring in a low-budget spy film. Each act was another felony gift wrap for prosecutors. When District Attorney Megan Cole saw the dissolution documents, the forged letters, the fake liens, the timestamp footage, and the shell company payments to things like Neighborhood Compliance Group, all linked to Felicia, her eyes went sharp. This isn't mismanagement, she said. This is fraud, elder abuse, discrimination, and organized theft. We built a task force. Quietly, carefully, while Felicia grew louder and more desperate, accusing me of corruption, plastering flyers around the neighborhood, holding emergency forums where she played propaganda slideshows of my house. She was going to destroy me publicly, and in doing so, She was setting the stage for her own downfall. Monday arrived like the opening scene of a courtroom drama, the kind where the music swells right before the gavel slams. The Maple Ridge Reserve Community Hall was packed tighter than a jury box on a high-profile murder case. Parents, elderly couples, young renters, new families, all of them tired, all of them angry, all of them unknowingly minutes away from watching justice descend with the force of a federal hammer. Felicia Carrington strutted in at exactly 9 a.m., heels clicking like she was entering Parliament instead of a decaying rental room lit by buzzing fluorescent tubes. She took her place at the podium, raised her chin, arranged her stack of forged documents like sacred scripture, and gave a smile so polished it could have been carved from ice. "Today," she declared, voice booming with fake authority, "we address the man who has attempted to dismantle our community's democratic order." Every eye shifted toward me, but my pulse stayed calm, slow, focused, because this exact moment, was what we had built toward for weeks. Felicia unveiled a dramatic slideshow, time-stamped photos of my house, blown-up images of my security cameras labeled illicit surveillance devices, and verbatim transcripts of conversations she'd forged. She presented forged affidavits supposedly signed by residents I knew well, Mrs. Delgado, the Parkers, even elderly Mr. Harold Klein, whose newspaper had triggered half a dozen bogus fines. Every word she spoke, every doctored photo, every forged signature, was being recorded by the hidden backup cameras I'd installed the night after she destroyed the first set. Finally, she pressed her palms to the podium like she was delivering a verdict. "I hereby motion for the immediate removal of Graham Ellison from this community for harassment, surveillance terrorism, and judicial intimidation." Her voice cracked on the words, judicial intimidation, the desperation leaking through the varnish. I stood slowly, not angry, not loud, but calm in the way only someone holding the truth can be. "Before any removal can take place," I said, lifting a single sheet of paper, "the community deserves to know something important." The room quieted. People leaned in. Even Felicia froze, her smile trembling like a faulty neon sign. "This organization," I continued, "the Maple Ridge Reserve Homeowners Association you claim to represent, ceased to exist on April 12th, 2 years ago." Gasps rippled across the hall like a physical shockwave. Neighbors clutched each other's arms. Whispers erupted, fast, chaotic, disbelieving. I held the dissolution papers up high, letting the seal catch the light. "For 24 months, this woman has collected fines, issued liens, threatened families, and weaponized police, while having zero legal authority to do so." A stunned silence fell. Then came the shouting. "You lied to us. You stole from my parents. You threatened our kids. What have you done to this neighborhood?" Felicia slammed her gavel so hard the handle snapped. "This is fabricated," she screeched. "He is manipulating documents. He hacked state records." But residents were already pulling out their phones, fact-checking in real time, watching the state website load the same dissolution status. That was when the double doors burst open. Federal agents in Navy jackets flooded the hall with deliberate, unstoppable purpose. FBI, IRS criminal investigations, and detectives from District Attorney Megan Cole's task force. The tension in the room broke like a dam collapsing. Felicia Carrington, the lead agent, announced, stepping forward with the ease of someone who had done this 1,000 times. "You are under arrest for wire fraud, mail fraud, filing false legal instruments, impersonating a corporate officer, identity theft, extortion, and conspiracy to defraud residents." The handcuffs clicked shut around her wrists. A sound so clean, so final, it felt like the closing chord of a symphony. Felicia fought, of course. She screamed about conspiracies. She accused me, the DA, the FBI, the residents, even the janitor of colluding against her. Agents had to guide her past the crowd as she shrieked. "I am the president. You can't remove me. I am this community." One agent replied, deadpan, "Ma'am, this community doesn't have a president. It hasn't for 2 years." Residents erupted. Cheers, applause, some crying, some hugging. It felt like watching a neighborhood exhale after holding its breath for far too long. 6 weeks later, restitution checks went out. Every fraudulent dollar returned with interest. Families who had lived under constant fear now felt sunlight again. The Parkers built a backyard playground. Mrs. Delgado finally slept peacefully, her immigration status never questioned again. Mr. Klein planted tomatoes without worrying about the newspaper police. And my own garden, long neglected during the chaos, flourished again with bright red tomatoes and hummingbirds returning to the yard. We reformed the HOA properly, transparently, with limits on power that would make any bureaucrat cry. Frank Morrison became treasurer, ensuring every dollar was accounted for. The Delgado Clause now requires the HOA to provide incorporation documents to any resident within 24 hours. And our annual meeting, formerly a battleground, became a potluck with laughter echoing across the hall. Evenings feel different now. Children play freely. Neighbors chat on porches. And when my sprinklers turn on, no one watches the clock. Sometimes justice isn't dramatic. Sometimes it's the quiet peace that follows. As I sit on my porch with a mug of coffee, watching morning sun hit the yards Felicia once terrorized, I realize something. Bullies fall, truth endures, and communities heal. But here's what I can't stop asking myself, and what I'll ask you too. When someone abuses tiny power for years, who's responsible? The tyrant? Or the people who stayed silent until someone finally pushed back? Tell me what you think. And tell me your worst HOA nightmare. Because trust me, I've heard them all, and some of them might just become next week's story.